If you had to identify three skills that have made the biggest difference to your career, what would they be, and which one surprises you?
I would say number one, perseverance, number two, communications, and number three, writing. So number two would have been verbal communications, and number three, writing. And what surprised me the most was number three, which is writing. I mean, nowadays you have large language models, etc., to assist with that, which I think is great. It amplifies human ability. But in my initial days, or when I was even applying for jobs, etc., large language models were not sufficiently sophisticated to help write a cover letter, for example. But as you progress in your career in an industrial setting, you would more often than not, your first medium of communication with someone, whether that is a potential customer, potential client, or a regulator, is your written word. And it does have a big impact on the chances that someone will get back to you, chances that they will get back to you positively or negatively. And I always thought of writing as a more creative pursuit. That's how I picked up that skill. But it turns out it's very commercially utilizable as well.
Is there a technical skill you wish you had developed during your PhD that would have served you better in industry?
I would say so. I would say two areas that I perhaps, I wouldn't say neglected to develop, but didn't necessarily have the obvious avenues or opportunities to develop. One was really around assessing clinical data. So if you're doing a very science-driven PhD, even if you're involved with the drug discovery aspect of things, you would have perhaps a good understanding about preclinical data, in vitro data, animal models, etc. But that doesn't necessarily translate to the skill of interpreting clinical data, which tends to be more messy, and it's a different signal to noise calibration. So that was a skill I could have easily developed in principle, because all of the clinical data is publicly available. So you can look into drugs that get approved versus don't get approved, and try and understand what are the considerations of risk benefit and things like that. So that's one aspect. The other thing I would say is having a greater understanding of artificial intelligence and coding in general is something I wish I developed a little bit more. And this is something I would say I did neglect, because there were certain opportunities to do so. I didn't necessarily take up on those opportunities, but now we are working with humans and AI day in, day out. So it really helps have that grounding and understanding of what AI can and cannot do.
That's an interesting point to bring up. And obviously, when you were doing your PhD, LLMs were not a thing, at least not commercially available and widely used. Now that they are, and a lot of people are undergoing or pursuing their PhD while they have access to all of these tools, a lot of them probably using them to help write their thesis, etc. What would you say are the things that they should be aware of in terms of advantages and potential pitfalls of using AI, developing the right skills with it, and then translating those into something that they can use successfully in their industry career?
That's a very thought-provoking question. I mean, we don't want to necessarily be future predictors here, which is the pace of the AI innovation is so fast right now that it's very hard to give an advice, because, for instance, we are recording this today in the year 2026. Perhaps next year AI will again surprise us with even more tricks. But that said, I would say general advice would be, do not become reliant on AI to the extent that if AI were to break or you were to lose your internet connection, you will not be able to do the job to the extent that AI would help you do it. So retain your human capabilities and independence. That would be one aspect. So things like writing, etc., and really having a thought around what is it that I'm trying to communicate, what are the broad themes, and organizing your written word in that fashion. That is a skill that's very easy to lose today in the advent of AI. So I would say that. So think of AI as something, or a technology that amplifies your abilities rather than holding it to fill in any gaps. If there are any gaps, you do have to still address those and work on those yourself.
What about soft skills? So, obviously these are the ones that are so far at least not that easy to automate with AI.
Yeah.
Leadership, communication, influence, etc. How did you develop those, and how important have they been in your role?
I think they're absolutely vital, and if not more important than technical skills when operating in a commercial environment. And in most industries, when you start off in a certain line of work, you typically start as an individual contributor. So there's a certain set of soft skills that is needed for that, but I would say it's still relatively limited. But as you progress in your career, it becomes more and more important, particularly once you start collaborating and then you start becoming perhaps a leader of a team or a manager of a bigger project, and that's when really you have to start thinking about all the human aspects of things. So you might wish to say that someone is, hey, they're not going along the right trajectory, but what is the best time and place and angle to say that, so that your team doesn't get demoralized? That is something to learn, and it's all about practicing that in not just your professional life, but also in day-to-day life with friends and family. Try and be a bit more aware of all the human aspects of emotion and empathy and all of these things. And this is something AI cannot automate for us.